Hello and welcome to the Monday Total Soccer Show, Part 1. I am Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who just stole my notes before we started recording. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. I did, but then I handed them back to you laughingly and you just looked angry.
So you actually didn't steal my notes before we started recording, because we are in separate locations once again, recording from home for canine-related reasons.
This is true.
But also maybe it's because I don't want you to be able to do what Ross Wallace did for Sheffield Wednesday against Huddersfield this weekend.
I was wondering if you were going to bring it back up, or if we're just going to move on and everyone was going to be like, wait, is that a thing that happens? Do they steal each other's notes? Is that why one of them sometimes doesn't sound as prepared as the other?
So, Taylor, can you talk us through this? This is my favourite thing I saw on Reddit this weekend.
Yeah, so it's basically Huddersfield Town losing 1-0 to Sheffield Wednesday.
Yep.
David Wagner sends on instructions essentially for how he wants Huddersfield to, I guess, adapt their tactics. As some coaches sometimes do, they'll send on the piece of paper with a substitute. And it's Heffel handing it to Kachunga, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's bad pronunciation. And basically, as Heffel's handing him the note, Wallace just steps in and grabs it. And then I would say pretends to read it and then gives it right back. Like, I don't think he could have processed anything in that amount of time.
Yeah.
That said, there's no way those notes are like complex theses on, tactical innovation. It's probably like, you go here, this guy does that, make sure you shoot. So you probably could process that pretty quickly.
I'm sure Wallace did read it because he looked at it, but then he was laughing heavily as he handed it back to Kachunga like it was all a joke, and Kachunga was not. That joke went down like a lead balloon, right?
Yeah, I think
it's like the worst. Like when there's a really bad SNL sketch and everything's just quiet, like the one this weekend where it was all the artists driving through the drive-through window, and you could just tell it's a long sketch and no one was laughing.
Yep.
That was the reaction that Wallace got from Kachunga.
It's also the situation when, like, maybe if it's 0-0 in the first 20 minutes, although I don't know then why you'd be having a substitution, but if it's 0-0, that's a different situation than if you're the team that's winning and you do that to the team that's losing, and in losing loses their spot at the top of the table, then you understand why maybe they weren't so thrilled to have a guy come in and take the instructions and mess things up.
That is actually what happened, right? Yep. Huddersfield fall to third this weekend.
This is true.
All right, but we can't spend too much time focusing on the Championship, except to say that Wolves should have beaten Aston Villa away in the big game on Saturday. The other big game on Saturday was Mr. Robert Bradley's Premier League debut as a coach. Swansea away to Arsenal. They lost 3-2. Bob Bradley lost 3-2 on his EPL debut.
He did, and he said all the right things.
What did he say?
Essentially, he said a lot of things in the presser, but the biggest one was that, like, this isn't good enough. Like, it's
really?
Like, sure it's a good result, but no one is leaving here happy. Which is what you want to hear. You want to hear your coach say, like, yeah, we lost, but there's positive things, but we're not happy about it. Rather than be like, hey, 3-2 to Arsenal away. I know for me that's good. Like, I would be pumped if my team lost 3-2 to Arsenal.
So where do we judge this then? So we watched the whole game and kind of did some rewatching for analysis. We'll get into some details of what we think Bob Bradley was trying to do, what went well, what didn't go so well. But just in general, do we put this down as a success or not?
I think you put it down as a success overall. I do.
Which feels weird, right? Even though they're in the relegation zone and they lost.
Yeah, I think number one, it's Arsenal. It's away at Arsenal, who have been, it's worth noting, we didn't talk about it in the preview, have been getting those results against teams that I do think in seasons past they would have dropped points. Yeah. So they're getting those late 1-0 wins. They're getting those fluky goals and the physical confrontations that lead to a goal. They didn't used to get those. They are here. So it's not the Arsenal that kind of choke up points and drop points whenever it matters.
Yeah, this is more of a machine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This Arsenal is more of an Arsenal.
Yeah, so, and that's why those historical record notes were frustrating me.
Yeah,
it's like that matters so little, but that's one of their, like, pro points for Swansea. It's like, that has nothing to do with this current team. It does not matter that they've won 3 of the last 4 or whatever. So to go in there and look like a team that belonged there, that made it an exciting game, that clearly caused problems for Arsenal, obviously had problems of their own, I think is definitely a positive sign for Swansea fans.
I do think maybe they got a little bit lucky with Swansea's first goal, where Xhaka is essentially overconfident and coughs it up to Gylfi Sigurdsson.
Yeah.
So it's 2-1 at half time, because Arsenal were very much on a roll at that point. And I feel like if that Sigurdsson goal hadn't been gifted, then this could have gone a different way. And it could have ended up like 3 or 4-0 to Arsenal. And then everybody's talking about Bob Bradley having a disaster on his debut. So I think he's a little bit lucky, but he kind of deserved his luck, if that makes sense.
Well, Theo Walcott should have had 3 or 4 more goals, right?
He maybe should have had one more.
I saw that article that you retweeted today, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, from Ted Knutson.
Yes,
yeah.
it was a good point, just about how like lazy commentary fuels this like kind of idea of how good soccer players are and what they should be scoring and shouldn't be scoring. It's a good point. I enjoyed that.
Can we put the link to that in the show notes so people can read it?
Sure. I will do that right now. He writes down, since he's the one in charge of show notes. But I think by the same token that Arsenal could have had more goals, I think Swansea also kind of gifted them the goals they did get. And so it's a weird situation when like it was clear individual mistakes that could have been prevented, but that's almost better than like just a team-wide failure where they can't execute and keep getting embarrassed by like one team doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Because then the narrative is more like these are the players Bob Bradley inherited.
Yes, in this scenario, yes, it's like good luck, Bob. We know you got problems. Versus like good luck, Bob. You've got players that aren't up for it, and you seem like you don't understand how to tactically organize a team.
Well, before we get into the specifics of the goals and the individual errors that were sort of highlighted and loud and clear, let's talk about what Bob Bradley was doing in this game, because he said he part of his interview, I believe, was he had a plan to face Arsenal. And I think I have my notes here. I have a good idea of what the plan is, but unlike Ross Wallace and Kachunga, we haven't seen each other's notes.
We have not.
So what do you see Swansea doing? Like, what was Bradley's master plan going into this game?
I mean, I've seen false nine written a lot, but I do think bringing Gylfi Sigurdsson in like centrally is something that I had talked about in the lead up to this game that I thought he might do, and having him do a lot of the running, do a lot of the hard work. I think it was smart of Bradley to identify a thing he wanted done, which was that hard running, the pressure from Gylfi Sigurdsson, and finding a player who would do that and would do it well, which is Gylfi Sigurdsson, and then using him accordingly. So even though it's maybe not a position that like we would have expected to see him deployed in, it still made a lot of sense to me in the long run.
Yeah, in the end, the two guys that I thought would be part of the central midfield, Leroy Fer and Gylfi Sigurdsson, ended up being almost a two-man strike force. I think Fer would come deep a little bit to make up numbers in midfield, but you could see it from kickoff, right, that Swansea were essentially in a 4-4-2 with Sigurdsson and Fer at the top. And I saw it as a sort of Leicester City 2015-2016 kind of style, where it's 4-4-2, it's pretty compact, and you put some sort of pressure on the defense the Arsenal defense as they try to bring the ball out, but you don't sort of overcommit yourself, right? So you just block everything off. I think that was the Swansea City plan. It was to be Leicester City. Yeah,
and even if you roll with the Leicester model from last season, like Okazaki would be the Leroy Fer, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely.
He does a little more dropping off, so you almost have it like a 4-4-1-1 at times.
Yeah,
and he's dropping in, trying to get the ball, trying to thread the attack, and then you've got Gylfi Sigurdsson running and running and running, a la Jamie Vardy.
Yeah.
And then you have, I guess, this season's Leicester in the form of defenders switching off.
Right, yeah, so we'll definitely talk about those individual errors in a minute. That is a deep, dark hole we have to dive into and then hope we can climb our way out, much like Swansea this season. But I also want to talk about sort of why maybe the Swansea 4-4-2, compact 4-4-2 didn't work as well as, say, Leicester's well-drilled 4-4-2 from last season. Because I saw, for example, Santi Cazorla broke those lines pretty easily in the first or second minute. And there were definitely spells where Swansea wouldn't let Arsenal pass it out the back, but there were also times when they were able to do it, and that's when suddenly there was panic for Swansea.
Well, do you have any idea why that went wrong, or do you think that's just Bob Bradley not having enough time to really coach them through what he wants them doing?
Yeah, I think they're mostly just not drilled in it. I think also they don't have an N'Golo Kante. I mean, that's even Leicester's problem this year, right? They're trying to do the same thing and don't have N'Golo Kante. And I feel like if you don't have a sort of worldy, all-star, magnificent defensive midfielder and you play a 4-4-2, then eventually someone like Santi Cazorla is going to put a pass between your central midfielders and you're going to have someone like Walcott running underneath between the lines to receive the ball.
First of all, yes, that all makes sense to me. Second of all, it's really got to be a good time to be N'Golo Kante, doesn't it? Because it's sort of like you win the Premier League and then you move to Chelsea and that move seems to be working, and your old team seems to be kind of imploding just a little tiny bit. And so you also become like the de facto man who held the team together. If you're the one who leaves and everything falls apart, then it's
I guess
see,
so.
it's all N'Golo.
Same would have been true if it was Mahrez or Vardy and suddenly the season wasn't going so well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then the other thing that I wasn't massively impressed with Swansea was their sort of counter-attack plan was, I think, and the idea was to short pass at high tempo. And I say that because I saw them try to do it a lot and because Bob Bradley's talked about it a lot, right? And I think Arsenal did a good job of mostly shutting that down.
Yeah.
They would like step and win the ball. or they would hit a long diagonal to Barrow and hope that his pace could get in behind, which was sort of an occasional success, but not enough to rely on.
No, but I think it pointed to what Bob Bradley has already seen in training and the players that he wants to focus on. And it seems like it's attack-wise, it's Barrow, it's Sigurdsson, and it seems like it's fair because I thought he was a little bit, what's the word, like rudderless at times in this game. But I think it seems like Bob Bradley likes the way he plays, likes to see what he's doing, and obviously knows he can get a goal, so wants to stick with him. So I felt like this game was sort of an indicator of who Bob Bradley already has faith in. I think Fernandez was also in that list, but maybe isn't anymore.
Okay, so shall we talk about individual defensive errors?
Sure. Yeah, but I guess I didn't even... Yes, I want to do that, but I didn't want to do that for the third consecutive time of you being like, but let's get to the larger issue first. Because what I meant by that was just that it seems like Fernandez was one that was coming back from injury that some people thought should be starting or would be the starter had he not been injured. And it seemed like this was a guy that Bob Bradley saw coming back and was like, yes, this is a center back. He looks good. I like what I've seen. He should be the starter. And then Fernandez comes in and maybe Bob Bradley sees why he shouldn't have been a starter. So that's what I mean. It's just like he had players that it seems like he wanted to fit in this game. And now he's probably going to reevaluate and see if those players are actually the players he wants to fit in moving forward.
Yeah, because I would argue that maybe it is that Fernandez is a better player than we saw in this game against Arsenal. Maybe Bradley got the selection wrong in terms of selecting him before he was fully sharp and fit. Right? Because I know Fernandez was out with a groin injury. And there were so many passes out of the back that were very, very, very stray.
Yep.
Like you need a bounty hunter to track down some of those Fernandez passes. And they would come straight back at Swansea City.
Mm-hmm. You could just classify the entire defense as stray. We'll put it that way.
Well, there are lots of like different errors, right? So I guess, should we start with, I guess, the first goal, right?
Sure.
The first Arsenal goal. Mm-hmm. I would point the finger at Wayne Routledge for not tracking Bellerin as he streams down the right outside of him.
Yep.
I would point the finger at maybe Neil Taylor for not quite holding the offside line, which was always I think every goal involves the offside line in some way for Swansea being a little bit wonky. It looks a little bit like Trump's approval ratings among women. It was always like straight and then a dip at the end.
So that's who you're putting it on? Because I feel like there's a name that you're not including in terms of who deserves blame for that first goal.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we're not even through the goal yet, right?
Okay,
so then when Bellerin's able to get in behind, because Neil Taylor lets him, because Wayne Routledge doesn't track him, so that's all of Swansea's left side has kind of failed. And then Bellerin heads it across goal. And I think Jordi Amat gets there first, right?
He does.
He gets there ahead of Theo Walcott, and I think tries to like juggle or tries to take it on his thigh in the box, and then Walcott basically nudges him off the ball.
Well, you can see what he's trying to do, which is it is like the smart defensive play, which is it's at about thigh waist level, and so he's essentially trying to thigh it away from Theo Walcott. But in that same motion, he's going to set himself up to volley it. So it's going to be like thigh volley real fast, get the ball clear. And I think
there wasn't time though. There wasn't time for that, Jordy.
Disagree. There's definitely time if executed properly, but if you thigh the ball straight up in the air, which is what he does, that you can put that to the Theo Walcott pressure and maybe some contact. But I think it to me more so is panic, maybe coming from like, oh no, we're in trouble, I don't know what to do, and in that moment he thighs it straight up in the air, and then it's always going to be a 50-50 ball at best, and at worst a goal, and that's how it ends.
See, I'm kind of from an Arsenal perspective, because I'm guessing there'll be some Arsenal fans listening to this who don't want to hear all about Swansea City just because of Bob Bradley. Yeah. One of the really exciting things for me as an England fan was seeing Theo Walcott show that bit of sort of strength and muscle to be able to basically outmuscle a big guy like Jordi Amat and sort of get there to score that goal.
I mean, yeah, and I know we have more to talk about with the first goal, but I mean, if you're talking about Walcott's strength, I mean, look no further than the second goal, which again, I mean, he backs off Cork completely as the corner comes in, and then really does outmuscle him, so to the extent that Cork tries to head the ball clear and can't get around Walcott. So then eventually just falls to Theo, who does well to turn and volley home. Again, in like tight space from like what could have been a blocked angle. Instead, he makes a goal out of it. So I felt like those two goals were very good signs, if you're an England fan, of like the predatory ability of Theo Walcott, but the strength and durability of him as well.
So let's talk about that second goal.
Sure.
It's I believe Bellerin getting in behind. And I think, again, it's Neil Taylor who doesn't hold the offside line. He gets a really good shot away that's saved by Fabianski, goes out for a corner kick. And it's the resulting corner kick that Arsenal score from. And I think you just kind of laid it out in terms of Cork couldn't get the header because he was sort of tussling with Walcott. It also, to me, it hits the back of Gylfi Sigurdsson. I think it hits his heel, bounces up, and Walcott reacts really smartly and turns and volleys. I'm concerned about the Swansea man marking system on this goal. I think everybody's too tight to their man with no room for literally no wiggle room.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know where you're going with this. I think, and I would disagree with your fundamental conclusion, but I think the larger issue is that when you go back and watch that, I mean, Sigurdsson who is he marking again?
Cazorla.
He has.
Oh, sorry, no, not Cazorla. Cazorla.
Excuse me. Yeah, thank you. He really does. Gylfi has Cazorla completely wrapped up, and that could have been a penalty. Cork really has his arms around Walcott. Mike Dean might give that as a penalty. So I'd say, like, even away from the fact that this ends in a goal, the fact that it's such physical defending, when we know this season certain referees have been inclined to crack down on that could have been a problem as well.
And we talked off air about this a little bit, where I started off saying that basically this is a failure of man marking.
Yeah.
As often happens on the Total Soccer Show, we argue it out a little bit, and I came to the conclusion that it's not just man marking, it's the way that Swansea are doing it, right? Yeah. It's because they're sticking too tight. I mean, they were like, if you've been in like a bar or a club and it's totally packed, it's definitely above the fire marshal limit, and you're sort of pressed up close to everybody. They were marking kind of like that.
What? Just like they were all pressed together?
Yeah, like they're all against the man that they're marking, right?
What kind of nightclubs are you visiting that end in grappling? Is that how you dance, Daryl Grove?
No, well, not anymore. In my younger days. But what I'm saying is, when you're pressed up so tight to your man, you can't get to the ball. You can't really do anything. I think Cork was a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, your like defensive work is stopping the opposition player from getting to the ball, not beating them to the ball first and winning it. Yeah, and
exactly.
You're not even reacting. You're sort of reacting to the player who's reacting, which is always going to be a problem.
And so then the question I have, is that a Bob Bradley instruction, or is that something that Swansea learned under Guidolin and Bradley's got to sort of dissuade them of it?
This might be my red, white, and blue colors showing, but I'm inclined to say that that's something that was already in effect, just because we've talked about how Swansea have been conceding goals from balls coming in from free kicks and set pieces. So that, to me, points to bad man marking, a bad system of defending when you have those set pieces, and it's something that maybe Bob Bradley was sort of like, we have so much other stuff to work on, we will deal with set pieces later. Right now, let's try not to just like be a sieve when it comes to our defensive responsibilities.
Do you imagine that in practice for the next week until the Watford game, which is the next game, that's something they'll be working on, as in like, let's get this right, we've got a week, let's do this?
I do wonder, like if you continue to make the same mistakes, like if you have a team that has like 3 foul throw-ins, like, do you say, like, yeah, we're working on throw-ins this week, or is that something that you just, like, hang your head and are just like, guys, we know better than this? Like, if it's such a glaring weakness, like, do you just focus on it all week? So it's like, yeah, we're not going to make this mistake again to the detriment of focusing on other things? Or is it worth getting that stuff ironed out in the short term? I don't really know the answer to that.
I mean, I think, okay, so to use our own experience as an example, we're coaching a team this year that had a really wobbly offside trap for the first game, and we worked on it in practice every Tuesday. We had the best offside trap I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, I guess
so. It's definitely worth focusing on your weakness and turning it into something that works.
I guess what I'm saying though is that that's part of like the run of play. Like if you're focusing on the offside trap, how we want to play like a high line and like to stay compact, that's something that you can like do in practice. That's part of like doing a drill, but also like regular play versus just defending set pieces. It's just like one guy out like on the corner flag, just kicking balls.
Yeah.
It's like, and again, and again. And again, like that feels very like drill oriented rather than open play oriented.
Yeah, I want Gylfi Sigurdsson to have a sore foot from putting so many crosses in practice for the team to head away.
All right, Bear Bryant, breaking your players down.
So you tweeted last night, I think, that you were rewatching the game and you were wondering if there was maybe a loophole in Ashley Williams' transfer, so Bradley could get him back.
Yeah.
Do you think it's almost as simple as that they're just missing that big defensive leader? I don't mean big just size-wise. I mean big in terms of personality and organization.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And yes, that's what they're missing. Because even like as you talked about, there's like offside problems with the first 2 goals. There's clearly offside problem with the third goal. And that one is the one that is, I think, that's the one that made me tweet that, the third Arsenal goal. Because it's just so like obvious what's happening and such poor reaction from Swansea, because it's Federico Fernandez has basically, he stays 3 yards behind the rest of the back line for the entire sequence of play that leads to the goal. And
again, it's the Donald Trump opinion poll shape of the offside line, right?
Well, then it dips back up because you've got Naughton running in because he's the right back. But see, that's the thing is as the play is developing on the other side of the field, Fernandez runs back to try to get into like the ideal space to defend, but it looks like he's going to mark Ozil. Then he passes him off to Naughton, and Naughton, who's like, oh, okay, sure. He kind of jogs in, Naughton being the right back, but then holds the offside line, expecting, I think, Fernandes to step back up. So he kind of does what he's supposed to be doing, Naughton. Yep. But then, because there's no offside line, it ends up looking like it's his mistake, when in reality, I mean, Fernandes just kind of blows that whole play.
He absolutely does. He drops deep, and then I think Alexis Sanchez does really well to spot it. There's a replay that sort of focuses in on Alexis, and he's like, looks up, sees it, and immediately chips it to the far post for Mesut Ozil. And then you'll see Fernandes, after the ball has been chipped, steps forward, which again, I can't be too critical because that's something I did literally yesterday.
Yeah, you're not a permanent defender. That's my answer to that.
That's true. Not yet, Taylor. Not yet.
Although maybe neither is Federico Fernandez.
Right, yeah. The part I find really worrying is not just the stepping after the ball, because I understand how you can get that timing wrong, like I said, from personal experience. But after the ball comes in, rather than sort of scrambling to try and block Ozil, he literally stands there with his arm in the air as Ozil is volleying it into the top corner.
Yeah. And that's what I mean when I think that like a more seasoned Premier League veteran leader like Ashley Williams is going to be one to make sure everyone stepped. He's going to let people know. And even afterwards, he's going to be the one to deal with it. And it just seems like there aren't players in that Swansea lineup who can deal with it. It feels like it's going to have to be Bob Bradley finding those players and making them confident enough to be the ones who can step forward and be vocal.
So we've beaten up on Swansea's defence almost as much as the combined talents of Theo Walcott, Mesut Ozil, and Alexis Sanchez. But it wasn't all bad, and that's the reason it only finished 3-2.
Only finished 3-2. Yeah,
that's the right?
Yeah.
Swansea scored twice, and like one of the things is Gylfi Sigurdsson's goal, I think, is worth sort of obviously crediting Gylfi Sigurdsson, maybe shaming Granit Xhaka because he coughed the ball up, but also worth giving Bob Bradley some credit because that was part of the game plan, right? Was for Gylfi Sigurdsson to not play as a creative midfielder, but to play high up and hassle Arsenal as they were bringing the ball out the back, and that's exactly what he did, and that's why he scored.
Yeah,
so thumbs up, Bob.
And actually, thumbs up, Bob, especially because I talked earlier about how it seems like Gylfi is, going to be the one to do the hard work, but I also wonder if Gylfi is one of Swansea's more intelligent players, and he's the one who can figure it out, just because he seems to be able to execute multiple different game plans from Iceland to Tottenham to Swansea. And I wonder if maybe it was just sort of like Bob Bradley quickly identified him as the one who could probably lead from the top and kind of lead by example. And so you're going to go out there, you're going to put them under pressure, and for that you're going to be rewarded with a turnover and a goal.
And hopefully more good performances from Gylfi Sigurdsson going forward. That's what Bob Bradley's going to need.
I'd be okay with that.
I saw him referred to as, in a headline, Swansea's best player. That gives Bob Bradley the thumbs up, basically saying that he's been enjoying practice this week and all that. So that's positive.
That's good. That's very positive. I think also positive, which you talked about before we started recording, was Borja getting on the score sheet. I think that's always a positive sign.
That was a Bob substitution, right? Borja comes off the bench, scores that second goal that makes it 3-2. But I think almost more encouraging, I guess that's Borja's first goal for Swansea, so that's a big momentum builder for him. But the thing I'm more excited about is Barrow. Yep. Barrow absolutely barreling down that right wing away from Monreal. That seemed like a weapon that Bradley Swansea were determined to use, and you really saw it starting to work in the second half.
You did. And so then you wonder, when Jeff Montero missing this game with injury, you've got him coming back, you've got Barrow on the other side. Suddenly you've got two very deadly, dangerous wingers. You've got Gylfi Sigurdsson in there. You've got Leroy Fair scoring goals. Maybe you've got Borja started to come good. Suddenly that attack looks a little bit stronger than it did only a week ago. Yeah,
I mean, and Fernando Llorente to come back as well, right? I mean, that was
it's kind of a big
prediction.
Deal.
My prediction at the start of the season is that Swansea would lead the league in Spanish-headed goals because you had Borja and Llorente, and you had those wingers sending balls in, and you had Gylfi Sigurdsson's set pieces. So maybe that's what the future looks like.
I have no idea how we're going to track that stat, but sure.
I mean, we're not. It might be quite easy to count Borja and Llorente's goals by the end of the season.
Yeah. And then I think the only other, I don't know if it's a positive or negative, would just be, I guess it's a positive for Arsenal that they got the result in the end, and maybe kind of a negative for Swansea that they couldn't take advantage of the 10 men. But we've talked time and time again about how it could be difficult to play against 10 men once Arsenal got that red card. And it seemed like Swansea did make some decent changes in there to try to get that late result.
So there was some debate about whether Xhaka's foul on Barrow was worthy of a red card, but I believe you contacted official Total Soccer Show referee consultant Scott Zawadzki to get the clear answer.
I did, because I thought it was a clear red from the start, and then I saw Arsene Wenger say it was like a dark shade of yellow is what it should have been. And And then
that's not how the card system works.
Exactly.
Arsene.
Exactly. There's no tint. But then I did see a lot of people from Arsenal fans to neutrals, even Swansea fans, saying, "Yeah, it probably shouldn't have been a red." And I was confused because for me it was an obvious red. So yeah, I messaged Scott this morning on Facebook very bluntly. I will add, apologies, Scott. I just sent him a link to the video with a caption, "Red card or no." And then I think I said, and also, "Hi, Scott. Good morning. How are you?" That's probably how people begin conversations. And he said that, yeah, it's a red card. It's a bad tackle. It's a dangerous challenge. And his guess was that the referee called the foul, obviously for like the professional foul aspect, but gave the red card for the like potential dangerous intent of the challenge, because it is from behind. It is going just for the foot. No chance of ever getting the ball. So for Scott, it was a justified red.
Right, and I think I sort of agree, but only after I've heard Scott say that.
Yeah.
Because it's not just like he clipped his heels to slow him down. It was kind of dangerous, right? It was up above his foot into his shin. Like it could have been horrible.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, right? Because I know a lot of people were saying like, how is this different than like pulling the jersey back or grabbing the shoulder? And I think the difference there is that you're using your hands, which are obviously a little bit easier to control. You know, you got that thumb and whatnot.
Yeah. Opposable thumbs.
Yeah, but and so in this situation, it's essentially Barrow's breaking at speed, Xhaka trying to catch up to him, trying to slow him down. Obviously can't grab for him, so has to slide. Really is like a good yard or two away from the ball when he slides. So he's only ever going to get the foot. And then because it's at high speed, it's going to result in a long fall and a long tumble, and it's going to look much worse. But even with that in mind, I still say, yeah, it's a red card.
And so I want to say at the time, I didn't think Swansea pressed the advantage enough when they had one man up. But in hindsight, there was a good 10 minutes from I think Xhaka sent off around the 70th to around the 80th minute where Barrow is really taking advantage of that extra space and is managing to burn down that right wing.
Right.
Nacho Monreal looks thoroughly terrified every time Barrow gets the ball, right?
Yeah.
And he puts in a couple of, one bad cross, but a couple of good ones. One that creates that Gylfi Sigurdsson chance that he shoots over. Mm-hmm. But I think it's in that play in about the 80th minute that Barrow injures himself and has to come out. So Barrow comes out and Arsenal send in some defensive subs anyway. Mm-hmm. And suddenly all that momentum is gone. And I think if Barrow had stayed in, you would have seen Swansea really go for it even more in that last 10 minutes, or at least be capable of going for it more.
It's almost like Arsene Wenger is an incredibly capable manager who has decades of experience with this club and knows how to nullify an attack.
Well, he got lucky, right? Because he was nullifying it anyway by bringing Gibbs in. Mm-hmm. And then the guy he was nullifying got injured and subbed out anyway. Mm-hmm. So I think everything sort of fell for Arsene Wenger in that last 10 minutes and for Arsenal.
I mean, and on a weekend when other teams drop points, when City dropped points and Spurs did as well, Leicester obviously struggling, it's a good result for Arsenal because it keeps them very much in that title race.
Proper title challenges, right? We can say that confidently at this point.
I think so. And then I think for Swansea, we kind of already talked about the overall result of this game and impact of this game. The one other thing I would add is that it seems like Swansea fans are okay with the result because you did still get those goals. It was still exciting. And I think a lot of what I saw as well was that fans were essentially saying, like, this looked like a team that had more energy. What we've heard about Bradley is he's a disciplinarian who's going to get the players fit. Yeah. Maybe you get them a little more motivated, a little more fit, and they're a little more willing to do the work that they need to do, and suddenly things start to turn around.
I'll say this, they seem to like him more than Guidolin, which I think is a big thing.
Yeah, I'd say language barrier probably key in that one.
Right, yeah, of course, yeah. No, Bradley, even refusing to say soccer, I think he's been referring to it as football.
Yeah, he definitely has. I've seen that.
I guess good for him. I'm not a fan of having to change your language in that way, but I guess he's just speaking the sort of lingua franca in England.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the way to do it. I think to come in and insist on it being called soccer would not go over very well.
It would go badly with the tabloids, right?
I think so. I saw like a bunch of joke satire articles about how all the players were already confused by his American terminology.
Oh,
which was the laziest form. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Set all those internet pages on fire.
Mm-hmm. So at Arsenal, not the easiest start. Then they've got home to Watford next weekend.
Yeah, that's next weekend. I think in a weird way that's kind of crucial because if he loses that game, then it's losing to a not particularly glamorous team, losing at home, and then suddenly it's winless Bob Bradley, right?
Yes.
He's without a Premier League win in his 2 games in, and suddenly the pressure's building, and Swansea are still in the relegation zone. So that's a huge, huge game that I will definitely be paying attention to next weekend.
Yeah, probably not going to be on TV would be my guess, but it will be streaming. So maybe we'll find a stream, we'll watch together, we'll critique, we'll analyze, we'll discuss, and hopefully we'll cheer a Swansea victory. Apologies to Watford listeners.
Right, where that game is. This past Friday, it was the battle of the best-loved Americans. It was Christian Pulisic and Borussia Dortmund up against John Brooks and Hertha Berlin in the Bundesliga. And it's also, I think, two teams quite high up the table because Dortmund are always challenging. Hertha made a really strong start to the season. Mm-hmm. So the game finished 1-1. Look, we're not going to talk about the Hertha and Dortmund goals as much as we're going to talk about the couple of moments where it was literally Pulisic versus Brooks.
Yep.
What stands out for you, Taylor?
I mean, I think just like going in, I was excited to see how they would match up, if they would get to match up, and they did. And I think I was surprised to see how much John Brooks seemed to struggle with Christian Pulisic.
Right? I think for both times, Pulisic looked too quick and too clever for Brooks, which is kind of worrying.
Mm-hmm. Especially since, I mean, they've just come back from training together. So you'd think that he'd be like, oh, right, you're really quick and clever. I should give you some space. And instead, it just seemed like he kind of went in a little bit too much at maybe the wrong angle. Pulisic able to get around him with relative ease.
I will say as well, though, Brooks was stepping out to face Pulisic after Pulisic had already beaten a couple of others, right?
Yeah.
So it's like Brooks was doing some emergency cover for someone else in both the situations I'm thinking of. The first one is when Pulisic goes down the right wing after he's so fast with those 1-2s because he can accelerate after playing the ball. Brooks has to step out to meet him sort of on the right wing, and Pulisic just is too quick and makes a bit of space for himself, crosses to Emre Moore at the far post, and Moore does not score.
Right.
The second one I'm thinking of is when Pulisic dribbles straight down the middle, and it's Brooks that ends up stepping out to meet him, but he's not the first to do so, right? It's like the second or third guy. There's a Pulisic slalom, essentially. And Brooks goes for a big slide tackle, which Pulisic slalom sidesteps. And then nothing comes of it. I think the pass is offside. But it's still definitely Pulisic had the beating of Brooks.
Yeah. And then maybe things settled down a little bit as like the game went on, because John Brooks kind of watched Emre Moore play and was like, oh, I mean, he's pretty good, but he's not going to score. Don't really need to worry about him. I'll move over to marking Christian Pulisic.
And there was also the big moment from this game. Mm-hmm. It actually didn't turn the game, except that Dortmund were on the front foot in the last 10 minutes after equalising, right? Aubameyang had scored to make it 1-1. Dortmund were kind of all over Hertha. And then Emre Moore, on a dribble through the central defence, goes by Brooks' defensive partner, Langkamp. Mm-hmm. And Langkamp, instead of like tackling him or fouling him or bringing him down, grabs Moore by the hips and won't let him get away.
Yeah.
Sort of like you do to a naughty child who sort of has a tendency to wander off. You sort of grab them quickly so they don't go anywhere.
It reminded me of if you've ever seen like video of teams doing resistance training where you like put the elastic band around the player and then the player has to run while the other guy holds him in place. That's what this looked like. It was kind of ridiculous how much he was being held.
I want to say it's the weirdest bit of defending I've ever seen in the Bundesliga.
Well, I think it was just he expected the referee to blow the whistle. They both did. And so, because it was a professional foul, again, with the opposable thumbs, that's why it would have just been a yellow. But then the referee maybe just thought Moore would wiggle away. Maybe he just thought something might still come of it. So he let advantage run for a couple more seconds. And that's, I think, what made it look all the more ridiculous. Because if you're Langkamp and you pull him back and let him go, and the referee's played advantage, then now everyone has stopped and Moore continues on. That could easily be a goal. So I see why he has to hold on. It just looks absolutely absurd.
And then the really bad thing is then Moore turns around and shoves Langkamp in the chest. Moore is not big enough to knock Langkamp down, but Langkamp massively overplays it and dives.
I'm going to say
backwards.
Crumples. Yeah.
Yeah, he timbers. He goes down. And we actually got a scouting report about this from Scott Friedman, who is Emre Moore scout, and he says that Moore responded by pushing the defender, who went to ground as if tiny Emre Moore was the Incredible Hulk, which I think is a really good summary of what happened.
Let me ask you this, Daryl. Have you ever seen Emre Moore and the Incredible Hulk in the same place at the same time?
I haven't, except for Friday afternoon.
There we go. See? Exactly. He's always angry. That's how it works.
Don't stop him dribbling. You wouldn't like him when you stop him dribbling.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fairly silly fall from Langkamp, but by the same time, it's Emre Moore reacting. Maybe could have kept his head a little bit more. But you see on the replay that he thinks he's not going to get a red card. He thinks he's not going to get a card at all. He's actually, it seems like, arguing with Aubameyang a little bit about who should take the free kick, and that's when the red card is produced, much to Emre Moore's consternation.
Yeah, he does that shocked face, right?
Yeah. And then gets escorted from the field by Felix Passlack. So good on that young defender.
Well done, Felix Passlack. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was doing the shush thing, right? Just stay calm, don't say anything, get off the field.
Yep.
Yeah, well done, Felix.
Yeah.
So also worth noting in Scott Friedman's scouting report on Emre Moore is that he's also suspended for Turkey after getting 2 yellow cards in World Cup qualifying. So Scott summarises it pretty well, where he says that Moore has to drop the petty antics and concentrate on bringing some clinical finishing to his fancy foot skills. And he'll have the next few games for club and country to work on his discipline as he'll be watching from the sidelines.
There we are.
But that means Pulisic maybe goes one more up the pecking order, right, at Borussia Dortmund. So it could be America's gain.
I think he was already ahead of Emre Moore, to be honest. I think he's already proven himself to be a little more consistent, I think, overall. I think Emre Moore is more of an impact sub for Dortmund at present.
And not in the near future, not even that.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of impact subs, Taylor, it's time for our MLS roundup. So our MLS coverage...
I'm not sure that tangent works, but sure.
Oh, it will. We'll talk about sort of strikers in their mid to late 30s, some of whom are willing impact subs.
I see.
Unwilling impact subs. Mm-hmm. See what I'm going with that?
Yes, I do.
So our MLS coverage is sponsored by the fine people at Roughneck Scarves, who will keep your neck warm and help you look stylish and very supportive of your team. That's Roughneck Scarves, RUFF, neckscarves.com. Mm-hmm. They're the official scarf provider for US Soccer, MLS, NCAA, and USL.
We're getting ready for the playoffs to begin. One more week until the playoffs start. And so, still time to get your scarf if you want to get ready for the playoff stretch.
So the decision day for the playoffs, which is what they call the final day of the regular season, is next weekend. This weekend, Taylor, it wasn't officially called this, but I like to call it penultimate playoff weekend. You with me on that?
No.
Fine. It's a one-man campaign.
I think because penultimate playoff weekend, wouldn't that be the weekend before the playoffs?
It's got some fine-tuning. I'm not saying it's finished. What happened to there are no bad ideas?
I'm not sure I ever embraced that. I think that's something you rolled with, not me.
There are bad Daryl ideas. So we've got 3 things each that we want to talk about in Major League Soccer this weekend. Roughly, I feel like there'll be some overlap.
Sure.
So would you like to go first, Taylor?
Sure. Well, why not go with what you've already mentioned? Let's talk about Didier Drogba for a moment, shall we?
The unwilling impact sub.
Yeah. Well, and I like that there was another sort of attempt by the club to cover it all up. Essentially, Drogba wasn't in contention in this game, wasn't anywhere to be seen in this game. The club said it was because he had a stiff back, but then reports came out that he had removed himself from consideration, and that's basically because Mauro Biello said he was going to be a substitute.
Yeah, so Mauro Biello wanted to start with Mancuso instead and bring Drogba off the bench. Drogba 38, by the way, right?
Yep.
So his idea was like that Mancuso would offer something more for the beginning of the game. Drogba's like this great weapon to bring off the bench late and cause all sorts of trouble. This is in the Montreal-Toronto game. Drogba said, no, it's either starting or nothing.
Yeah, and I think if this were like in the middle of the season or at the beginning of the season, I would wonder more about those rumors linking him with a couple different clubs, including Napoli. And maybe if this is him like agitating for a move. But given the way things are, I'm guessing this is just Drogba being frustrated that he's not the automatic starter anymore and that he is playing in Major League Soccer, that he feels like he should be, that he should be the first guy on the team sheet, especially given like what his performances did for that team last season. But I think, as you said, a little bit older, it can't quite put the pressure on the defenses, which was Biello's excuse for not starting him. And I think that's a fair reason, especially since, one of them is the coach and the other one is not the coach.
Turns out the one man marker he couldn't outrun was Father Time.
Do you have that written down? Is that in your notes? I have to ask.
No, that's off the cuff.
On the fly. There we go. Well done.
Unlike Ross Wallace, you'll never know. So is that the reason Biello gave, that essentially he doesn't like close down defenders and stuff because he's 38?
I think it was, I can't remember the exact quote that I saw, but I think it was something along the lines of like, if you look at the pressure he being Mancuso puts on that back line, you understand why we wanted to see him and see what he could offer, basically.
That makes sense to me. I also really admire that Biello came out and told the truth as opposed to sticking with the party line of he's got a stiff back.
Yeah, I think when one party isn't kind of towing that line, it becomes harder to stick with it.
And the result was, it was a 2-2 draw, so Toronto equalised late. But Mancuso was involved in in winning the penalty kick that made it 2-1 to Montreal. Montreal are now in the playoffs as a result of Biello's decision. But I don't know what happens next with Drogba.
Nor do I. But I do know that the Eastern Conference deadline day playoff picture is very clear and far less dramatic than the West. But that's another one of my points. So we can hold off on that one for now.
Well, okay. One of my points then is I want to switch to someone who was a willing impact sub. And that was Carlos Ruiz for FC Dallas. So only a year younger than Drogba. Ruiz is 37, I believe. Hasn't played since May, or hasn't played club football since May when the Guatemalan season ended. All he's managed to play in is a few Guatemalan national team games. Re-signed with FC Dallas on deadline day, September 15th. Made his re-debut for FC Dallas, or second debut, I'm not quite sure what the correct term is. Coming off the bench in the 77th minute, scored the winner against the Seattle Sounders with... Have you seen this goal, Taylor?
I have. It's a poke.
It is a poke, but it's like it comes over his shoulder almost. It's almost like he's a wide receiver. Like I don't know, who's a famous Cowboys receiver, a Dallas receiver?
Oh, you've gone Dallas?
Yeah, well, because he plays for FC Dallas.
We'll go with Michael Irvin.
Okay, I saw him play. So, it's like he's Irving. The ball comes over the top of him, and instead of catching it, he pokes it and scores.
There we go. I mean, yeah, and it's a good goal, and obviously it's an important goal for FC Dallas. The downside of that, which is another one of my points, is that they also have some injuries, as do a couple other teams in the league. But you did have Kellen Acosta finishing this game on a crutch. Mauro Diaz sent to the hospital. It's since been confirmed that he has a torn ACL, which means you're without your key playmaker heading into the playoffs.
So that's Diaz out for the rest of the season, right?
Yes.
Oh, no. That's bad news for Dallas because he's obviously key. He's also, a great player to watch.
Yes, but obviously also a torn ACL is never a great thing to have. Yeah, so so we'll see what happens with Acosta. Diego Valeri, if we're sticking with the injury theme, subbed off for Portland. I'm not sure to the extent of that one. You also had injuries for Seattle and Chad Marshall.
Ouch. Okay.
Yeah. It was a rough weekend.
Last point on FC Dallas, I believe they are top of the Supporters Shield race, and they can get away with just a tie to win the Supporters Shield to beat Colorado Rapids there, because Rapids lost 1-0 to the Portland Timbers.
They did. The issue there, if you're talking about the Supporters Shield, is that, FC Dallas are ahead by 2 points. The problem is that they are away in a CONCACAF Champions League game on Thursday night, that if they lose, they will be eliminated from the group stage. So they kind of have to win that game if they want to advance. But that also means playing a relatively strong team away, then having to travel to Los Angeles for their final game of the regular season. So it's a lot of mileage in this next week and a lot of away games in the form of 2 games in 7 days.
And all without Diaz. And I'm not sure, that 13 minutes from Carlos Ruiz, I'm not sure having Ruiz coming off the bench replaces having Diaz for a whole game.
No, I would say it probably doesn't.
In a similar situation, Portland Timbers. So after that win over Colorado, they are now level on points with Sporting KC, but they are below the red line. Timbers have that game. I can't remember where they're going, but they have a big CONCACAF Champions League. No, CONCACAF Champions League game on Wednesday.
Okay, cool.
Yes, they have a similarly must-win game. Do you remember we talked about this? Nagby scored their free kick in the last game.
Right.
So they have a big game on Wednesday and then a big game at the weekend. So I wonder how much they'll be sort of prioritizing or managing resources. You know what I'm saying? Which does Caleb Porter target the most?
I think making the playoffs, even though that's not really he's not in the driver's seat for that one right now. Yeah, you have 4 clubs all in contention for those final 3 spots in the West. And then you have the Supporters Shield race wide open as well. So it's going to be an interesting decision day in the West.
In the East, one thing I want to talk about is our local DC United.
Let's do it.
They made the playoffs.
They did.
This sort of felt like a thing that wasn't going to happen this year, and they've suddenly turned it around.
Yep, they sure have.
And the man I want to focus on is Patrick Mullins, scoring against his old team, NYCFC. And also having, I think he gets credit with the assist, where he intercepted a back pass to, I think Saunders was the NYCFC keeper. And then Saunders got down on it, and then Mullins tackled him as well, because I don't think he had full control of it. And then he squares it to, I believe, Vincent to score. And I want to have a think about Mullins, because he's that player that, he's 24. And I always feel like 24 is a certain age where guys come out of college, bounce around a couple of MLS teams, and then they finally find a place that works for them and they start performing. That's what Patrick Mullins is doing at DC.
All right. Yeah. I mean, that said, he's coming from NYCFC, who also have some players who are performing. So it's not like they're hurt too badly. You do have David Villa, who did get the goal in that 3-1 loss. He got the goal for NYCFC. But Bradley Wright Phillips got 2 goals in his game. So BWP now 1 goal ahead for the Golden Boot Award.
All right, go BWP. I'm supporting the Englishman in that race.
And while we're talking about NYCFC, though, and I brought up injuries earlier, we had it was interesting to get kind of a minute-by-minute tweet of the Ronald Matarrita injury
from
Moment of Magic Pod on Twitter.
Yeah,
we got Matarrita went down with a really bad ankle injury, and NYCFC kept playing through 2 of their own throw-ins. I've never seen a team voluntarily play a man down for that long. They went on to concede another goal. The team has gone in for halftime. Matarrita still getting treatment. I'm shocked. Sounds like a rough couple minutes there.
So I don't understand why you would play on when your player's down and you get a throw-in, right? You've got the chance to not. To not keep going.
I have no idea. Other than maybe you're just like trying to keep the tempo up and keep pressing. But yeah, it really didn't make much sense to me, especially when he's a defender who's also one of your better playmakers. Not ideal. Not ideal to have him out of the game.
2 final things I want to talk to you about, Taylor. I mentioned the FC Dallas win over Seattle. Seattle did have a magnificent goal from Nicolas Ladero. Have you seen this free kick?
No.
So it's he's taking a free kick as if he's going to cross it, right? And Dallas, like, everyone shifts to, if you're looking at it from Ladero's perspective, he's on the right. All of Dallas like shifts to the left, including the goalkeeper, because he's ready to come and catch the cross. And then Ladero sees a massive gap at the near post, and instead of crossing it, just fires it inside the near post. It is a beautiful, beautiful free kick, and the type of quick thinking that Ladero brings to MLS that's always fun to see. And we've praised Seattle, so we've got to praise Portland just to keep things nice and even. Have to mention that Timbers Army tifo that was on ESPN, Taylor. I think you saw this too, right?
I have.
It was the Polaroid with the phrase, always keep your goals in focus and your dreams will develop. How about that?
It's not bad. That's not bad.
Look, I really like it because it's not like aggressive. Unless there's some hidden meaning that I don't know. It's not having a go at anyone and it's not sort of nasty. It's just like a positive message with a clever tifo.
Except that you're slightly on the outside looking in when it comes to the playoff race at this point, so maybe that doesn't quite materialize.
Well, this is about keeping your goals in focus, right? And they did what they needed to do this weekend. It was like keep the playoff goals in focus.
That's true. But we'll see if next week they actually materialize.
That'll be the exciting game, right?
Or they develop, excuse me, yeah.
Yeah, if playoff dreams develop. All right, so today's MLS segment was sponsored by the fine people at roughneckscarves.com. Roughneck Scarves, where you can buy US national team scarves, MLS team scarves, as well as many other scarves, including custom scarves. We have a plan, Taylor, to get a Total Soccer Show scarf in the shop. It's not ready yet, but that is coming in the future. A little more on Roughneck. The price that you see on the Roughneck website is all inclusive. The simple and honest pricing means no hidden fees, no unexpected shipping charges, and no surprises. The only surprise is the price that you see is actually 20% lower if you use the promo code Total Soccer Show, all one word, all uppercase.
There we are. So once again, that's roughneckscarves.com, RUFFNECK, and then you can just spell scarves for yourself.
Final thing on today's show, Taylor. It's the TSS Scouting Network.
It is.
We've already heard from Scott Friedman on Emre Moore, but we have 3 more scouting reports to read today. These are fine young players being tracked around the world by the even finer people in the TSS Scouting Network.
Up first, we have a report from Kim and Oliver Debu scouting Will Hughes, the 21-year-old midfielder for Derby County. It sounds like he is recovered from injury. He was back playing for them this weekend. The better news is that Steve McLaren has come in. Steve McLaren opting for a 4-3-3, which will allow Hughes to be farther forward for this team and do a more attacking role. Under Nigel Pearson, he was doing more defensive work, which didn't quite suit his game. So Kim and Oliver are, I think, more excited than some other fans about the return of McLaren. And the big news is, I remember when we assigned them to Hughes, he tore his ACL, so there wasn't a lot of news about him. Mm-hmm. So at least he's back and playing. That's the more important thing for me. Yes, I think immediately after we assigned him, that ACL was torn. There's the curse, and sometimes there's a bump when you're in the scouting network. Exactly. Let's see what happens with Matt Miazga then, because Doug Chan is scouting Matt Miazga, officially Chelsea defender, but on loan at Vitesse Arnhem. Doug says Miazga started his first game in Vitesse's 2-2 draw with RZ. The Vitas, which is, I believe, what Vitesse has on him called, were ahead 2-0 with 15 minutes to play, but ended up drawing 2-2. From what Doug could see/read, Miazga wasn't at fault for either goal. Thumbs up. Most of the reaction on Twitter was positive. Doug used Google Translate, it seems. Michael van der Werf, Vitesse's usual starting centre-back, is expected to be out for 6 weeks, so Miazga looks likely to get some regular playing time as van der Werf makes his recovery. We'll see if he can establish himself as that starting centre-back at Vitesse. We will, but credit to Doug, who it does seem like went through Twitter, found tweets about Miazga in Dutch, then went to Google Translate and translated them. That's impressive. Magnificent. Work. That's impressive scouting. Certainly is. Also impressive scouting, albeit sad. scouting comes from Kirsten Maladinha, scouting Brielle Mbolo. Kirsten writes that she sends us this report with, quote-unquote, a heavy heart. Mbolo started for Schalke in their match against Augsburg on Saturday. He looked lively. He looked up for it. Then he went down under a bad tackle from Augsburg right back Konstantinos Staflidis, I'm going to say a.k.a. the ruiner of joy. Mbolo was stretchered off and subbed, and Schalke sent out a tweet after the game announcing that Mbolo had broken his ankle. Since then, things have only gotten worse. Kirsten follows up to say, it turns out he not only broke his ankle, but also his fibula and tore both his ankle joint ligament and medial collateral ligament. Schalke say he'll be out for at least 6 months, so unfortunately this probably ends his season.
Man, things were going so well for Brielle Mbolo.
Yep.
He was like a Scouting Network up and up guy, right? And suddenly big things were happening for him at Schalke, and now this.
And now this. But hopefully he rehabs, he comes back. If Will Hughes can do it, so too can Brielle Mbolo.
That's it. That's the inspirational message we need in the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network.
There we are.
If you would like to join the Scouting Network, you will be supporting the show and you'll be keeping track of a promising young player. You can do it at totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. Worth noting, if you don't want to scout a player but do want to support the show, we are fully on board with that idea. Sign up. There's a little box where you can leave an optional note. If you say no scout, we will not assign you a scout if you don't want one. We can't force people to do work, right, Taylor?
We cannot.
So once again, to support Total Soccer Show, it's totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. All right, Taylor, we're coming toward the end on today's show, but maybe not the end of today's work.
That's right. We've got Liverpool, Man United. Last I saw, kickoff, or at least broadcast time, was scheduled to begin at 3 p.m., so we'll be watching that, putting out a show somewhat afterwards. I'm not going to say immediately afterwards.
Soon afterwards, let's say that.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. It's a better, more grammatically correct way to put it, I think.
All right, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
And I will see you just before 3 o'clock, ready for that game.
That sounds good.
Listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. And we will talk to you again later today.